with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, November 11th, 2021. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Ryan Cooper, national correspondent at The Week, joins us to discuss inflation, infrastructure, and more. Meanwhile, Biden will sign the bipartisan infrastructure package on Monday, which will provide billions in public transit and railway investment. However, we still await the CBO score on the social spending bill, which Manchin and co. will, or could, certainly tank now that they have what they want. Kyle Rittenhouse testified in court yesterday about his killing of 2 BLM protesters and injuring a third, where he appeared to weep and where the judge openly castigated the prosecution. More on that later. A federal judge has blocked Texas's ban on school mask mandates. The ban on mask mandates. Block that. Ruling that it violates the rights of students with disabilities. But in Pennsylvania, the state court sided with the Republicans on mask mandates, and the state's Democratic governor says he will appeal that. The U.S. and China have agreed to work together on cutting emissions over the next decade, or at least that's what their press release says. Firm commitments were largely avoided. China, for the first time, did declare its intention to cut methane emissions. This comes as 6 automakers agree to phase out gas car sales, including Ford, GM, and Mercedes-Benz, but excluding Toyota, Nissan, and Volkswagen. A judge has granted an over $600 million settlement to the Flint water crisis victims, but the victims say it's wildly insufficient. Lawyers will be taking a cut, and no health care for long-term damage for children, no additional assistance, no real accountability. And lastly, the New York Attorney General has released hundreds of pages of transcripts from the investigation into former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, which includes his defiant testimony and that of 10 people accusing him of sexual harassment. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. It is Thursday, so Sam is out today. It's the day that comes after Hump Day, you might be aware. We have a great show for you, though. I am particularly fascinated to talk about the inflation mania because it's coming from the richest segments of our population, and I think that's by design. We can talk a little bit about that with Ryan Cooper. And we stayed away from the Rittenhouse trial yesterday, but I think it's important to look at for a variety of reasons. But the number one for me is to get a glimpse into what judges are like in this country in an increasing way. So the Kyle Rittenhouse homicide trial is obviously in the headlines. Rittenhouse, as you probably know, killed 2 BLM protesters, Anthony Huber and Joseph Rosenbaum, and severely injured a third, Gage Grasskutz, shot off his bicep almost entirely. Rittenhouse was 17 at the time, and he felt compelled to stand up to the Black Lives Matter protesters and demonstrators. And he said his explicit desire was to protect property. Now, again, he was 17 at the time, but he killed 2 people. And he took an AR-15 rifle to Kenosha.
And he ultimately killed people over protecting Kyle Rittenhouse in the situation that he put himself in with a firearm.
Yes. Now, we're going to watch this footage from yesterday of him crying on the stand, or at least appearing to be crying. you guys can take with it what you will. Either, in my opinion, he's faking or he's just kind of a weird dude. We don't really know. But this moment has caused someone like J.D. Vance to call the entire trial child abuse. Not that they care about black and brown children being tried as adults to a degree that is very disproportionate with the rest of the population. But here's Kyle Rittenhouse on the stand.
Died, and I was cornered from in front of me with Mr. Zeminski, and there were three people right there.
Take a deep breath, Kyle.
That's what I... That's what I run.
We're going to just take time for our break anyway. You can just relax for a minute, sir. We're going to take a break about 10 minutes, and please don't talk about the case during the break. Watch.
So you see the emotional break.
Yeah, it looks like the sort of kid you would want going in a different state to protect property with a gun.
Or having access to the gun. I mean, whatever. That's a whole separate conversation. He took that from his uncle, right? Was that the case? Yeah. So, I mean, look, I am not gonna, I think, make a claim about whether or not that is real or not. It's a little off, but at the same time, he's scared for himself, and that can produce tears in and of themselves, or a severe reaction. What I do want to focus on, even though that was the moment that went most viral from the case yesterday, is the judge who, as I mentioned in headlines, admonished the prosecution a few times and seemed to take quite a favorable posture towards the defense. This has also been his reputation in Wisconsin, and it was why the prosecution was pretty adamantly against him being a part of this Rittenhouse case. So there were a few moments in which he yelled at the prosecution that you can look up and we can get into at another time. But a separate moment happened in conjunction with those other moments of admonishment that raised a lot of eyebrows. The judge's phone went off in the middle of the trial, and it played a particular song that seems in keeping with his past history.
I don't think that's necessarily what I'm supposed to do. But I think the court has to make some findings as it relates to the bad faith on the part of the prosecution. And if the court makes a finding that the actions that I had talked about were done in bad faith, then I think both elements
That's I'm proud to be an American. God bless the USA, and particularly the version that I remember quite vividly because I went to many Trump rallies at my previous gig with TYT, and that was Trump's walk-on song. Now, you could say, wow, that's a coincidence. Maybe he's just a patriot, and usually that does coincide quite well with fascism, that self-identification. But this Will Bunch thread, it's okay, Bradley, I have it. This Will Bunch thread is, I think, going to paint a picture that's a lot more damning. So this judge, Bruce Schroeder, he first was noticed early in his 40-plus year career on the bench. In 1987, he made headlines requiring AIDS tests for sex workers. Told he'd be challenged for violating civil liberties, Schroeder said, "I hope so." By 2006, Judge Schroeder had such a bad reputation for his outrageous style and stiff sentences that hundreds of defendants had requested a different judge, causing a massive backlog in Kenosha County courts. Schroeder's highest profile case before Rittenhouse was in 2008 when a man found guilty of murdering his wife with antifreeze, and Schroeder doled out a life sentence, but he botched it. An appeals court tossed the conviction. Schroeder made an evidentiary mistake. Just this year, the appeals court overturned the judge for public shaming of a 28-year-old woman convicted of retail theft. He ruled the woman couldn't enter a store without telling management about her criminal past. So, as I mentioned, there was a reason why the prosecution was wary of having him on this case, but he's not an outlier with judges throughout the country. This is why Democrats winning is important. It's completely insufficient, but it's important, because when Republicans win statewide and when they win on the federal level, and McConnell has been on the federal level incredibly effective in this manner, they stack courts with judges like this. Now, this is in Wisconsin. It's a separate situation, but there are a lot more judges like this Judge Schroeder, than there are that are not like him. And it's just going to increase in numbers based on the organization of the right, and also the focus and the money behind it. And if the left doesn't treat these judgeships with the seriousness that they deserve, you're going to have many instances like this. So, all right, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be joined by Ryan Cooper of The Week to talk about news of the day and more, including the inflation freakout. We'll be right back. We are back, and we are joined now by Ryan Cooper of The Week, national correspondent at The Week, whose book is coming out in January, which we'll definitely have you back on to talk about that. I'm excited.
Hooray.
Yes. Ryan, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So your pieces at The Week are must reads for me on a weekly basis. Lame. So I want to talk a little bit about this inflation freakout. I'm not sure if you saw that CNN piece. I think you may have alluded to it in your recent piece on how inflation is affecting Main Street, which to me just kind of reeks of an assignment editor being like, everyone's concerned about this that I know. Now you, reporter, go out onto the street, find a family of 9 to see how this affects their inordinate milk purchases on a weekly basis, and then we'll work backwards from there. Like, what is your take on how government officials and the press in particular have responded to this over recent days?
Well, you definitely have a kind of freak out that is totally not matched anytime we have high unemployment. High unemployment is usually regarded as a sort of, I mean, if you remember after 2008, when we had an entire decade of chronically high unemployment, it was like, well, this is a kind of annoying problem, but really we can't do anything about it. And it's probably skills mismatch. The video games have gotten too good, but like once prices start going up, and that means that nominal creditors, meaning rich people, are potentially taking a hit to their their wealth, then people start freaking out. But I do think, it is a significant inflation number. It's like the highest number since like 1990, I think. And so, people definitely don't like it when prices of like staples go up. You know, the meat is up by a lot. Bacon, especially, you know, the epic bacon Elon Musk guys are suffering. And gasoline is up by like 50% year on year. So that, you know, the CNN piece was crazy in that it picked a ridiculously unrepresentative family with like 12 members who apparently they have like a glass of milk with every single meal, and then picking milk as the, you know, representative commodity, and then not explaining like what was going on, you know. And that, I think, is a lot more about the pandemic and supply chain problems than it is about, you know, unemployment being too low.
Right. I mean, there's no context in this conversation about inflation, too. I mean, the supply chain bottlenecks make a ton of sense. And also inflation rising post major catastrophes or major national events is not something that's new for America and for the economy.
Yeah, exactly. And there's an aspect of this that I've only recently sort of come to understand, which is that, you know, you have the supply chains were brittle. They've gotten messed up by COVID. You know, as I said, we had a decade of a low unemployment or low employment, chronic high joblessness, and therefore not very high demand for things. So like companies cut their capacity down to the bone. You know, they didn't have anything extra. And then the pandemic screwed that up and is continuing to screw it up. But the other part of it is that you have, you know, consumers on net, American households are doing pretty well income wise. People have a fair amount of disposable income, and they're spending that income on goods to an unprecedented degree, rather than services. So, you know, again, because of the pandemic, people aren't going out to restaurants or gyms or hair salons or other things like that nearly as much as they used to in 2019. And instead they're buying stuff, you know, and that stuff, because of the way that the economy has been set up, has to usually be shipped around the globe. And so you're getting these big tangles. But, you know, for all the problems, we're actually getting more, you know, the level of deliveries of things is way higher than it was before the pandemic. So like the things are being sorted out and things are being delivered. It's just not quite fast enough. And so you have, you know, shortages of many things. And you know, that's sort of being rationed by price. But it does not look to me, I would say the most fundamental thing, it doesn't look at all like something that like the 1970s, you know, which people may forget. In the mid 1970s, we had like 5 consecutive years of 7% inflation, and then 3 consecutive years of like 12% inflation. You know, this we've touched 6%, not really the end of the world in and of itself, and for 1 month, you know. So like the freak out is at this point, you know, totally over the top. Yeah.
How does this square with the record debt that Americans hold? Over $14 trillion, I believe. I wrote down this figure, but numbers fly out of my brain incredibly easily. Yeah, over $14 trillion in debt that Americans hold. And the child tax credit has alleviated some poverty. I mean, that's not some of the context that wasn't in that CNN piece. When they have 9 kids, okay, they're getting a child tax credit. That's definitely enough to offset the milk increase. I just wonder how that disconnect even begins to happen.
Yeah, the household debt is going up, but household wealth is also going up. You know, you have people have been buying homes. You know, the home ownership rate is ticking up, and house prices have been increasing. You know, that it doesn't bode well in a lot of ways. You know, especially in some of these really hot markets where, you know, prices are going completely insane. But that does mean that people feel much more comfortable to spend as compared to when their wealth is declining. You know, after 2008, you had this big debt overhang, and that ruined a lot of people's credit, and so they're not spending as much. You know, whereas like if you have a you know, home that's appreciating in value, you'll get offers for money in the mail. You know, they'll send you, take a home equity line of credit out, $50,000. And so, you know, that can set up some problems down the road. But for the moment, I think Americans are feeling pretty flush on net. Again, you know, there are a lot of people suffering, as there always are in this, you know, rotten country. But, you know, the average household is doing pretty good, especially compared to where they were in like 2009.
So is that kind of bunched into a specific cohort of people where wealth is increasing and spending is more likely? Are the divisions widening?
Oh, well, I mean, to some degree, you know, you have the child tax credit, you know, as you were saying, that's distributing a lot of spending power pretty far down the income ladder. You know, theoretically, all families should be eligible for it, even though there's problems reaching them because they designed it weirdly. But yeah, I mean, this is not to defend, you know, like the distribution of income and wealth in this country, you know, just sort of pointing out the dynamics. And you absolutely can see the amount of money that's being spent on goofy nonsense is through the roof. You know, there's definitely kind of a bubble mentality in people who have, you know, money to burn. And I think that's a lot of why crypto is so hot. You know, people just, they got more, you know, wealth than they know what to do with, and they're just spending it on baubles or totally weird, you know, pump and dump funny money on the computer.
The stock market's also at high at this moment too. So, you know, right, exactly. I think that fits in really well. I want to touch on your piece on electric vehicles as well, but I don't want to move past inflation before we kind of dive a little more into why I think. I mean, John Schwartz had a really good piece in The Intercept today on how basically creditors are the ones driving this inflation freak out to a large degree, because that massive bulk of $14 trillion in debt, it loses value when there's inflation. And that's very disproportionate as compared to, you know, the milk price. We'll keep returning to that example. What's your sense of that?
Oh yeah, that's a great point, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I forgot about that dynamic. You know, there's a sort of a sweet spot for, you know, your kind of Jeffrey Q homeowner type person, you know, where you have like a fair amount of inflation going on that erodes the value of your mortgage, but then your wages are staying just a bit ahead of that. You know, so that inflation in the 70s was really a godsend to a lot of homeowners who took out fixed rate mortgages in the 60s and early 70s, and then saw the effective value of those completely evaporate, you know, over a year. And yeah, you know, there are a lot of you know, banks and credit card companies and stuff who see that, like, if prices go up and wages keep pace with that, especially, which is what we've been seeing. You know, there's some you know, inflation adjusted wage declines over the last month. You know, it sort of depends on where you stand, how much gas you buy, how much bacon, you know, that sort of thing. But you know, this is a pretty seeing some pretty powerful wage increases, especially at the bottom. You know, like the worst kind of service jobs, the things that people don't want to do anymore after the pandemic. You know, you've seen in like restaurant workers seeing like 10-12% wage increases over a year. I mean, that's enormous. And so, you know, the inflation can have a good side to it if wages keep up with it. And so far, it seems like they probably will, especially as I would expect to happen, that this is probably a transitory thing. You know, it may last a few months, maybe even a year, but I don't think it'll be anything like the 70s.
And is that mostly what you would attribute to this labor kind of revolution, where a lot of laborers are understanding the value of their labor, I guess, in a way that they haven't in decades?
Yeah, there does seem to be a sort of revolution in consciousness among a lot of people. You know, we've sort of stumbled into this situation where people are struggling to hire for these crummy jobs. So many people, were working, doing terrible restaurant jobs that were like life threatening. And a lot of people did die. A lot of working age people are dead, and a lot of people retired. They took early retirement, got their COVID bucks and a house price increase, and just pocketed that and said, I'm done. And so I think that this probably explains a lot of why the employers and elites are so like exercised about this. They see not only that like you could have these sort of mechanical aspects that would change the way, that would sort of harm them materially in their bank account, but also there could be a political challenge that the working class could get restless, and that we could see more strikes and more unionization and stuff like that. And that maybe is even more important than like protecting their bottom line, is to keep the working class down so that they don't have any sort of threat to the business owners' domination of the economy.
Yeah, they're most concerned about wages increasing. I mean, they would take wages staying stagnant over temporary inflation concerns for their bottom line, I would imagine.
They'll sacrifice profits to keep wages down.
Yeah.
So a lot of these people, it's an existential threat to their business model. They depend on an infinite supply of desperate, disposable people that they can run through at Amazon warehouses and stuff like that. And if it's like no one will work if your job is terrible, well, then a lot of them are going to go out of business.
Right. Let's turn then to your piece on gas prices, which I is so, everything you write is great, and I really, really love it. But I mean, it's so common sense that it's just annoying that the powers that be don't get it, because if gas prices are part of what's driving this consumer price index increase and inflation and the things that the powers that be are quite concerned about, okay, well, maybe we don't need to be dependent on oil to the degree that we are. I love when your cat makes an appearance. But that they're so focused on short-term gains, and when we have representatives and senators who think like in terms of quarterly profits, as opposed to how are we going to set up our country and our citizenry for success long term, it leads to this kind of thinking. I guess we'll start at the outset of your piece about how transitioning towards electric vehicles could take some of this volatility out of the market because it wouldn't be so heavily dependent on oil.
Yeah, it is a very obvious point, but you think about it, when you got to fill up at the pump, you depend on whatever the price of oil happens to be, and the price of transporting it from wherever it came from, and any relevant taxes and so forth. And that, just as everyone knows, it tends to gyrate wildly, just depending on the market conditions, whether they happen to have invented some kind of fracking technology, like that's a relatively recent. And if you are using electricity is generally produced by a whole bunch of different sources. It does vary in price, but usually not by as much as oil does. And you can produce it often if you're, if you're a homeowner, you can produce it by yourself. I have solar panels on my house. I produce more electricity than I use, actually. So I don't pay anything for electricity anymore, just a grid access fee. And, if most people, not true of everyone, the government will give you a tax credit, 26% of the cost of installation. And so if you move to this is not to defend this as like the best possible future, but if you were to just take gas out of the equation, and say, okay, if you have a car, you've got an electric car, and that's just how we get around now. This is, it's all, we've got all our charging stations figured out and all that stuff. Then yeah, no more worries about gas prices, and no more of the sort of broader political aspects of that, and how how worries over gas prices lend political heft to these calls that we've been talking about from business owners to strangle the economy, throw people out of work, reduce incomes, and therefore reduce the price of gas.
Yeah, I mean, how much of it is I don't know, a fear about political blowback about moving away from gas prices? Because like some of our politicians, I would think someone like Biden is so, you can tell he's reflexively afraid of people saying gas prices are up under you because of inflation, and look at, you know, how you're running the country into the ground. I feel like we go through this every 2 years where the president's criticized for gas prices. No one makes the consideration, all right, how about I disengage from this in a way that also would work for me politically?
Yeah, people tend to think for some reason that the president has a big button or a big lever on his desk that just set the gas price, you know, up or down, just pull on that lever. And it, you know, it really doesn't make any sense. And, you know, I think it speaks to Biden's sort of institutional conservatism and his old habits that he wouldn't sort of get behind this. I mean, he did drive around in that Ford F-150 Lightning, an electric truck, you know, say it's nice vehicle, you know, and threatened to run that reporter over, if you remember. He was just kidding. But yeah, I mean, it's a lack of vision, and it's not even in just the United States. The New York Times recently had an article about how there's like a gas shortage in a natural gas shortage rather in Europe, and that's causing higher electricity prices. And a lot of people are backing off of climate policy. They're saying, "Oh no, we can't do renewables because you know, gas prices are going up." And it was just somebody from Spain who was like, "Hang on, that makes no sense at all. If gas prices are screwing us over, why don't we get rid of the gas and just go to totally carbon-free power, and we don't have to worry about this stuff ever again?"
It also just allows us to kind of, and you wrote about this in your piece too, disentangle ourselves from the Middle East. Now, there will always be an appetite for militarism. Biden is pivoting to Asia, selling nuclear-powered submarines to Australia as a part of this new, I don't know, way to ramp up Cold War-esque tensions for, I guess, political purposes, but it's pretty obscure, in my opinion. You know, that would be a great effect of this exact transition that you're mentioning.
Yeah, and I think this actually, I mean, it wouldn't really affect Americans all that much, but I feel like the rest of humanity would benefit greatly from this. You know, as I say in the article, it's wrong to say the global war on terror was just like about securing oil supplies. I mean, because number one, it didn't work. Number two, you know, we spent $6 trillion, you know, which is enough to like buy up the entire Iraq oil, you know, like reserves on just on the market, which Saddam Hussein would have sold to us for sure. And there's, you know, there's a sort of the imperialist mindset behind that. But, you know, of course, you definitely can't take oil out of the equation entirely. You know, it's why we got our alliance with Saudi Arabia established in the first place. It's why we toppled Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran in 1953. That was explicitly about preventing Iran from nationalizing the British oil company there. You know, when the Bush administration invaded Iraq, the first thing they jumped to control was the oil ministry. You know, they could see, you could see the bias that influenced that, and you also see it in the amount of attention that we pay to like Venezuela and Russia. You know, and that's definitely a source of conflict there. The fact that these regimes that are hostile to, you know, America get to make a ton of money by selling oil on the market. So yeah, if we were to just like, I mean, again, as you say, it wouldn't defeat the blob entirely. We would still have this huge pressure to like gin up conflict with somebody so that Raytheon can sell missiles that don't work, or that whoever can build aircraft carriers that don't work, or F-35 fighter jets that don't work. But I do think it would really knock one of the big props of some of the worst imperialist abuses. and just like stomping all over the Middle East for 20, 30 years to, nobody's benefit at all.
I'm curious about, and I agree with a lot of what you say about how electric power is necessary but insufficient, because what concerns me a lot about this infrastructure push is there is very little motivation to, or public transport seems secondary.
Yep.
We're still trying to tweak our infrastructure in a way that benefits the vehicle, as opposed to like, all right, let's maybe create more robust public infrastructure, which every climate scientist and expert seems to say is what we need to do to more seriously combat climate change. Do you have your fears that this emphasis might sap a larger public infrastructure model?
Yeah, it's really a bummer how little there is for transit and whatnot in the infrastructure package. There's some for Amtrak and for ruggedizing the grid and stuff like that. The whole thing is just inadequate to any conception of what you would do to get emissions down in the time that they need to get down. It's a bit of a flop in that sense. However, I do think that this shifts the ground of contestation. So you have a big pot of money for roads and stuff like that, and that means that that money is fungible, as they say, and I think that if it all goes through, including the climate stuff in the Build Back Better package, it'll open some space for cities to spend more on their level in terms of building transit stuff, and I think especially building bike lanes and pedestrian infrastructure. This is stuff that's relatively cheap, and it's stuff that would be very appropriate in a lot of cities like Los Angeles, like San Diego, like New York City. With the rise of e-bikes, biking is a much more viable option than it once was, and places that are hot or they're real hilly and stuff like that. And so I think there's going to be a window for contestation at the local level to make cities more bike friendly, to expand their bus networks. The kind of it's unfortunate this is what we're sort of reduced to, but your basic package of urbanist stuff, density and transit and bike lanes and whatnot. And that, I think, would be really suitable to a lot of places, because if you make the cities safe to bike, a lot more people will bike, and that would cut down. That would probably do more emissions wise. If you could do this in every city, then probably most of the explicit climate policy in the Build Back Better agenda.
Yeah, it is not safe to bike here in New York City. I mean, like I have seen especially delivery drivers on bikes get knocked over. I mean, it is not. That would be huge. It's just so much of our city infrastructure doesn't even allow currently for that. It just we'd have to be serious about it, basically.
Yeah, and there's the stuff that it isn't all that difficult. You go to especially if you're talking about like B plus type of bike infrastructure. You go to Copenhagen, you see it's like there's little grandmas riding around, with like a baguette in one hand. And it's just, you need separated bike lanes, and you need like better signaling and stuff. This stuff isn't that difficult, and it doesn't cost billions and billions of dollars. I mean, it might in New York City, once the Sandhogs union gets going on it. But if you want to be A plus like Amsterdam, like that's difficult and it takes a long time. But there's a lot of low hanging fruit, even in sprawly American cities, where you could make places a lot easier to not have to use a car, and that could really, I think, start develop a sort of sea change in the way that Americans think about urban planning and cities, to where you don't, necessarily need to have a car, and sort of remove that from its sort of throne on top of the, policy heap.
Ryan Cooper, national correspondent at The Week. Thank you so much for taking your time to speak with us today on short notice as well. I really appreciate it.
Of course, anytime.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, folks, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be talking a little bit more about infrastructure, some of the troubling elements in it, including this anti-drunk driving tech in cars that I think poses some problems, as well as Trump's response to infrastructure. Be right back. We are back. The theme of this show could be screw cars a little bit.
Cars are bad.
Cars are bad. And I mean, again, that's one of the troubling parts of infrastructure as constructed by our lawmakers, is that it still continues to emphasize the car.
Yeah, sprawl and highways and freeways and stuff is all subsidy to the fossil fuel industry.
And the car in and of itself is also fetishized in this country for a variety of reasons that also have to do, I think, with some well-placed, or I would say well-intentioned but misplaced nostalgia about union work that has been decimated in this country but is on the rise again. I saw this very under-the-radar story in the New York Times about anti-drunk driving tech in cars, which is being included in the infrastructure package. So Congress has approved a mandate for new technology in cars, which would take place in 2026, that they say would combat drunk driving. Over 10,000 people die in crashes involving a driver who's impaired by alcohol, and that statistic was from 2019. Although vehicular deaths are, I think, maybe around 40,000, something to that degree, in and of themselves. So the drunk driving element is certainly a deadly part, but it's not all of it, of course. Cars are just deadly. And a lot of what we've seen as a response to the human element in cars is to be, okay, well, self-driving cars, that's the new way to go, as opposed to, again, more robust investment in our public infrastructure and in public transit. So, of course, I don't condone drunk driving on this show. I just want to make that clear. 100% it is wrong. We don't want that. But the question is, how would this technology work? And the Washington Post explains that this is how it would be mandated. And NHTSA has been working with the Automotive Coalition for Traffic Safety, an industry group, since 2008 on systems to discreetly detect alcohol on drivers' breaths or in their blood. The driver alcohol detection system for safety project has been testing sensors in recent years, including with a Virginia transportation company, and hopes to have a road-ready approach by 2024. Another option would be to rely on cameras that monitor drivers for signs that they are impaired, building on systems that automakers are using to ensure people relying on driver assistance technologies don't lose concentration. The stuff about monitoring alcohol on people's breath or in their blood, I don't like the collection of someone's biodata, but I'm even more concerned about drivers being monitored for losing concentration. Say you're somebody who works 3 jobs, say you're tired. Is that data going to be collected in a way that could be used against you at a certain period of time? And who knows if you were actually drunk during that period and a crash was caused? Driving tired can often look like driving drunk. You shouldn't drive tired anyway, but we should have the option for people not to be driving with public transit, which we don't have in this country. Matt, did you want to say something?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's about the data collection entirely. Like, I think it's some idea if your car could tell, like, your head's slumped because you're drowsing off, and it turns on some kind of light or flasher, like the same way you drift into the side lane, that like I forget what that thing's called, that the bump strip that makes the noise, right? Like that sort of feedback, I think is useful, but again, it's the data technology thing. And of course, if this is all done in conjunction with industry groups, they're going to be collecting the data for other purposes.
So that's the biggest question, right? Is this one way to expand the surveillance state and put it inside of your car? Who is this third party that's going to be collecting this data, collecting information about one's movements and their biodata and their blood and their breath, whatever technology they decide on? Apparently, they were considering breathalyzers for every car, and they chose to do away with that as well. Which, I mean, again, do we want our technology to work anymore?
Can I take a devil's advocate position? They're making cars sound so like annoying to buy,
cumbersome,
that maybe this is an attack on the cars entirely.
Matt's in favor of this.
Let's make it worse.
Yeah, make the seats spiky.
And you have to do a cartwheel before you get in.
Yes. A complicated math problem in order to unlock your car.
I mean, I would just subsidize public transportation, but if this is the only way we can do it, by punishing people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just wouldn't know where this data is going to be going, where it's going to be stored. Is it going to be stored within the physical car itself, like a black box on a plane, or is it going to be stored in a big cloud to be used at will by law enforcement?
Oh yeah, just sent straight to Palantir.
Exactly. I would imagine that this has some connection with like a group like Palantir or Facebook or something like that. I mean, this is not a good way to go, but this is going to be included in the infrastructure bill. Again, if we want to get serious about people drunk driving and our green energy, we have to invest in public transit in a way that is exponentially greater than what we saw in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, even though that is the biggest investment that we've had since the 70s when Amtrak was created. It needs to be a lot broader than what it is. It's insufficient. And so there's this tendency by Democrats and capitalists, really, that technology can fix everything and that we can maneuver around problems or fix them or kind of push them away from our brains and not legislate in any real way and not enforce and not create if tech just fixes it. And but
as if like people aren't creating tech and embedding their politics into the technology they're creating, right? Like when we've innovated these massive giant four-leaf interchanges of highways, right? And really, what has that done? Is like that's the kind of innovation in technology we're getting, is when you just allow things to be determined by like suburban knights and the politicians that they offer, that they like, is like that's why both parties are geared to this, right? Like both parties are very much playing for the suburbs right now, and the suburbs like cars, and so that's basically why we're stuck in this right now. And because then that was a decision by capital to make the suburbs too. I don't want to blame the people there.
Yes, and this is also kind of a silly point, but it is a true point. When we keep doing these, let's make it cleaner, right? When you go to the bathroom in a public restroom, You don't have to touch the toilet. You don't have to touch the sink. Actually, it makes it not work. Those sinks don't work, right? And that's what this kind of technological innovation for the sake of it does. And that's kind of what I feel like they're going to be doing with these cars, as well as the implications for the broader security state. That, I mean, if a car is monitoring the way that you are driving it to this degree.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's really a disgrace that we're still, again, we're not talking about advancing even electric buses through cities. There should have been just a massive program for that.
There's some of that in infrastructure, but it's like tens of billions or something.
This should be the leader, right? Like something transformational happened, but that's not what's being sold. What's being sold is we're going to do everything the exact same way we're doing, but just green. And I'm sorry, suburbs don't work like that. Automobiles aren't going to work like that. We're not going to be able to have the lithium required to get everyone a Tesla. I just don't buy it. I think it's more of the delusion of the moment.
Yes. And another point I didn't want to lose is that this could also potentially be a Fourth Amendment violation, because drunk driving is a criminal accusation. Not that we have much of the Fourth Amendment anymore, but it's a criminal charge, and collecting and searching and seizing data about somebody drunk driving is it's warrantless, and it also is immensely broad. But at the same time, our judges and our judicial system has shown a propensity to allow for these mass bulk data collections to continue as long as they can only be accessed at particular times by the authorities. Another way to obscure the fact that these authorities are operating under biases, and when they choose to collect this data, it's usually within those biases.
Right. The access thing just points out that it's being recorded for later access. Like everything is just being recorded, and if they want to access it later, they can. I mean, that's what my imagination of how this system would work is. Like you can see it's not for safety, right? Like that's the really galling thing about this. Just like, I don't know, like, yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know if this will amount to anything, but it's something I just want people to be aware of, because it doesn't sound good to me. Doesn't sound good. Before we wrap up this first hour of the show, let's talk about Trump here too. Former President Donald Trump, he spoke at a NRCC fundraiser on Monday night, and he was talking about Biden's infrastructure package and the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure package in the House, in which 13 Republicans voted for it. 3 of those Republicans are not seeking re-election, but 10 of them are. And Donald Trump wanted to send a warning shot to those 10, including Representative Nicole Maliotakis. I can never say her name right, but she represents Staten Island, and she voted for it. But Trump's not going to have that. Trump's not going to have that.
I say it with a heavy heart. No thank you goes to those in the House and Senate who voted for the Democrats' non-infrastructure bill, also known as the Democrat presidential re-election bill. It's only 11% was infrastructure, by the way, 11% of that bill. Much of it's Green New Deal crap, just like throwing money out the window. But you gave Biden a victory as his poll numbers were falling off a cliff.
You do miss some of those weird ticks that he has. I mean,
he should be on cable news, honestly.
Yeah, that's where he belongs. He was a cable star for a long time. He would be prime. Tucker Carlson would be shaking in his boots if Trump was able to take over his slot at 8 p.m.
Yeah, okay, Tucker.
Yeah. It is interesting when Trump chooses to dip his toe back into the Republican races here. We saw what happened when he stepped back in Virginia, and when Glenn Youngkin purposefully pivoted away from him post-primary. It allowed for him to have victory, but that's in a very different area. Virginia is not a pro-Trump state by any imagination, even though it's more purple. That's not the flavor of Republican that they appreciate. Same with here in the Northeast, that will sometimes inexplicably elect Republicans in safe blue states because they like a certain kind of Republican, like a Romney type, but not Trump types. So he's being a little bit more strategic, but it's just a taste of how he's going to continue to flex his muscle. Those 10 Republicans, or I should say the 13 Republicans, because they're still in power, Kevin McCarthy is going to strip them of committee assignments, or that's under consideration, or leadership and committee assignments. I forget exactly which one. So Trump is able to still maneuver behind the scenes what he wants to happen, and this is still his party. It just depends on when he decides to be vocal about those things and when he's strategic about it. But I also do like the tacit admission that he believes that this infrastructure is a win for Biden. Even though it's the non-infrastructure bill, it's the infrastructure, infrastructure.
That's what's funny is like he's jealous because he should have just clearly done this himself. And I'm like relieved looking back. I wish he had just done this because you could have probably done the same. The problem with Trump is like not that
there would be no clean energy in that infrastructure.
They didn't start spending money until COVID hit. But if COVID hit earlier in his presidency, like I think that's really what changed. Like even like the Democrats' willingness to spend on to the extent that they are more willing to expend. It's not because it's basically because we have to.
Yeah.
But yeah, like. There might have not been any climate stuff in the bipartisan one that Trump would have passed, but fine. Like there's barely any, and maybe we could have just moved on to something worthwhile instead of they already did the bipartisan one under Trump. Let's move on to our own shit, whatever. Right? Like,
yeah, I know, but.
Like also Pelosi and those people, they would have given him the victory, and that's why he's I think kicking himself that he didn't take one like that, because I mean not that I consider this much of a victory. I think it's not much of anything at all, frankly.
All right, folks, we are going to wrap up here and also maybe close the window because I don't know if you can hear that. There is some drilling outside. Oh, it's not outside? No.
It's in the building.
I get super self-conscious about ambient noise on the mic because I know that bothers some people.
I don't think they'll hear it, though.
Oh, really? It's all I can hear. That is it for the first hour of this program. Thank you so much for tuning in this Thursday. We're going to be taking your calls in the Fun Hap, and we will be joined by Matt and Brandon. But just a reminder, everybody, it is your support that allows this program to continue. Please become a Majority Report member if you are able and if you appreciate the show. And if you really appreciate the show, buy a ticket to our live show at the Wilbur Theater in January 16th. We will be in Boston during that at the Wilbur Theater. Going to be a lot of fun. Might have some fun guests that Sam is going to be announcing in the coming days and weeks. Check it out. Podcast description and YouTube description should have those links for you. Matt, what is happening at with Left Reckoning and in the Matt Leckian media universe?
So Left Reckoning last night, we had Paul Bowers on talk about South Carolina, the politics there. We talked about Nikki Haley, Tim Scott a little bit, and also the coastal versus highland. I think that's what they call it, high country, the political dynamics you got there. So nice little trip into a country close to David Griscom's heart that I know very little about, except that they have sort of plantation tourism and a Vanderbilt castle and BMW, ununionized BMW factory. So we talked all about that stuff. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We also got very angry at different Democrats about COP26 last night. And look for that. And also this weekend, we're talking to Kowalski from Nebraska. For patrons, patreon.com/Left Reckoning, about farming. What's his farm like? What does he imagine the future of farming to be? IP and right to repair, stuff like that. So anybody who's interested in agriculture, patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
Awesome. All right, let's let in Matt
Binder.
Old Matt. Here he is, connecting to the audio. Matt Binder and Brandon coming around the bend. Matt, how are you?
Hello. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. What's happening over on Doomed?
Tonight on Doomed, over at youtube.com/Matt Binder or twitch.tv/Matt Binder, whichever you prefer. I'll be talking with Michael Hayden of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Yesterday, he went on the ground at one of the first sort of end of pandemic times, or towards the end, where more people have gotten vaccinated, Groyper event, where they held in Staten Island. It's the first since everything that's happened the past couple of years. So we'll get from him what went on at this event.
Awesome. And is Brandon here?
Looks like he might just dropped off.
Oh, he dropped out. All right. Well, everybody check out the discourse. More of Brandon's stuff. We're going to head into the fun half. Take your calls, reach your IMs, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy!
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me...
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
We are back. We are back. And we are joined by Brandon shortly, but we were able to fix his audio. Again, check out the discourse. I'll read some IMs while we await his arrival. Anthony, Emma and Old Matt, are you familiar with Twitter behavior where sports fans reply to national beat writers something like announce Correa to the Yankees or announce Olsen trade to the Red Sox, as if the reporter is the author of these events, not the messenger? I wonder if this indicates anything to you regarding the relationship people have to CNN and the media they distrust and resent. It indicates to me that people have a childlike relationship as child growing into teens resenting their parents, says Anthony. I'm not sure. I mean, I think oftentimes people are just like joking and want to get likes and whatever.
Yeah, so it's like, first of all, I don't watch any cable news. I think it's bad and a waste of people's time. And basically, like, the CIA has like an attention economy, sort of like get people's time waste on stuff. Would be watching cable news. But that said, I think people are a bit too precious about like, oh, I don't get any news from that. I don't get any news from this. Like, the point about bias in media is to understand it so you can understand how it's coloring the information that they give you, right? Like the New York Times, you're ultimately going to need to get some information from there, but also know that it is slanted for, and they have expressed this in the past like 5 years, capitalism. They literally say they're a pro-capitalist paper, right? But you can't just all of a sudden not deal with the New York Times at all, because it is still the paper of record.
And it's still it serves an important function if it's supposed to, when it operates as it's supposed to.
They also like hire good journalists too, like apart from what the ownership thinks, like that this is an information producing enterprise. And I think people are, a little bit in media literacy. It's like, oh, I don't ever read anything from, and you see this most rancidly on the conservative side, right?
Yeah.
Where they're like not reading anything but Breitbart and Fox News, and even Fox News is probably too liberal for them now. So I think if maybe that's what the IMer's getting at, I agree that people need to be a bit more grown up and adult about digesting media.
I don't know if I said it on this show last week or if it was my own show last week, but I recall very recently bringing up how like people really have very bad media literacy in general. And that's not obviously a knock at them. I mean, unless you're working in this field, I mean, I guess you can't expect the average everyday person to go about doing their own job and then understand, I should say, someone else's and how that works. But this country especially has a really bad misunderstanding of the media and how journalism works. And, one example I always go to, because it seems so obvious, is that there are people who believe that journalists just put down, refer to people who give them information as sources just so they could say something and make it up without attributing it to someone who is real, without realizing that, no, the only reason you can get this information sometimes is by not attributing it to a person who has to hide behind an anonymity, because otherwise they couldn't give a journalist this information. That's something you often see online where, if something says sources say, or a source told someone, you see people say, you just made this up, or, I don't believe you. Name your source.
Right.
But actually, like, there's a problem in sports journalism where they do a little bit too much of that unsourced reporting stuff, and it's basically just PR for...
Adam Schefter just did this. I mean, I tweeted this out. Adam Schefter tweeted out that Dalvin Cook was the victim of a extortion attempt when they wanted to get out ahead of the story that both parties, Dalvin Cook and his ex-girlfriend, are claiming domestic abuse. But with all of that said, I just want to formally welcome Brandon to the show because he got a haircut. And that was the first thing I noticed. That's the only reason I'm saying hello to you.
I'm only allowed back because I have a haircut now.
Yeah. We said, we have
that's the rule on the show. You can't have long hair on the show. It's just too much for us to handle.
Yeah, it's definitely not
allowed.
Too much for me to handle. It makes my head feel hot. I feel way better. I mean, but just to the conversation about media literacy, I kind of picked up on the last little bit of what the IM said. I think that it's kind of a difficult line to thread sometimes, because there's a version of advocating for media literacy that I think I mentioned this on the show when we talked about it last, that is just like completely shifting the burden of keeping accuracy in journalism onto the people who read it and the consumers, which, sort of like beta testing articles before someone fact checks them as wrong and then like hurriedly ushering out a correction. When in reality, media literacy, I think, more requires understanding the underlying cause for why certain articles and certain institutions are incapable of doing good journalism. Otherwise, you're just talking about how do we justify including people into a system that is just like not working.
Right.
No, I agree with that as well. And to what, Matt and Emma were saying before too, to me, corporate PR is a little bit different when they ask like a journalist to this is on background or off the record, so you can't source it to them or attribute it to them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like, an employer at an organization giving a reporter, inside information because they think the public should know something about this organization they work for. That's what I mean when I'm attributing that. But yeah, it could definitely go both ways, and it is a real problem due to as Brandon brought up before too, corporate media taking, just not doing a good job at their own profession that they claim to uphold, and they end up muddying the waters for everybody.
Right.
Well, yeah, because especially I really think like print, I would distinguish print from cable television, which cable is just there to give you the feeling that you've been informed long enough to keep watching their advertisements. And there's a degree to which that obviously influences print as well. But like the amount that is jettisoned from cable, I just think and I hate like when I have relatives that are like, oh, they're trying to impress, because they know what I do for a living. They say like, oh yeah, I've been keeping up. I've been watching CNN and I've been watching Fox. They're watching all of them, right? And it's like, you should be watching none of those actually. Like, don't watch Fox News and MSNBC. Don't watch that. Watch better content, frankly, unless of course Sam's on.
Well, I know. I mean, I feel badly like that there are so many well-intentioned people in my life that think they're impressing me with statements like that, where it's just that actually you're making me think less of you.
Yeah, like, well, it's like you've been sold, like you've been sold the myth about cable news, and really like that wasn't even true back in like the Cronkite era, right? Like and it's even less true now. The people are less scrupulous and more mercenary, I think, than they were back in the old days, even if it's less monopolized. And so people just got to learn, like, if you want information, you got to go to like probably some kind of print publication, honestly.
I also, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go, Brandon.
No, I think just Matt's last point there.
Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon. AKA now, thank you, Brandon. And of course, Brandon is superior.
Brandon is always right, obviously. Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think to Matt's point, we have kind of, through the lens of neoliberalism, prioritized individual journalists and pundits' ability to, like, quote unquote, be journalists over doing journalism in any way that is coherent and in a sense of the public interest. Because I mean, I think back to when, I mean, it happens a bunch of times, but back to when, oh my God, who is I guess it was either Woodward or Bernstein sat on that Trump information to put in his book under the understanding that, well, yeah, this is going to be the selling point of my next book that came out, as opposed to putting out that information publicly about what he said about coronavirus at the time. And, we've seen this idea that it's within the realm of acceptability for journalists to prioritize their job at any individual journalistic institution over what is, arguably their job to disseminate the truth, under what I would say is this kind of, well, sometimes they are allowed to say the right thing, sometimes they can't. But if they sit on information, it's all for the greater, purpose of one day exposing what can be the truth. And I mean, take it with a grain of salt, but the whole like back and forth where it's like, what appears in the Washington Post isn't what the writer is saying on, Twitter or their social media feeds. Like, they can play it both ways. Like, I think that, again, sometimes when we prioritize the ability for people to, expand their career in journalism, we do so at the, the sacrifice of individuals who rely on that particular person or institution's ability to like freely disseminate information, essentially not doing that. Because I remember back to when like Bernie implied that the Washington Post, which it is kind of a rag because they are funded by billionaires, and every, pundit, whether they identified as like, center left to like far right, was like, how dare Bernie imply that Jeff Bezos tells us what to write? It's like, that's not what he said. And it's ridiculous to even imply that he said that, because, everyone wants to bring Noam Chomsky on to like get his views on shit, but hasn't read Manufactured Consent. But like, that was just kind of an acceptable thing that people could do under the auspices. Like, well, yeah, we know they have to play ball to keep that job.
They made the bar really high so that they were able to clear it.
Of course.
Yeah. Let's, I'm going to read a few more IMs and then we can get into some clips. District Jabroni, forget breathalyzers in cars. Next step is to make your Hello Tushy not work if it detects you've recently eaten Taco Bell. You do the crime. You do the time. Mind Pillow Guy. Adam Ruins Everything had a fantastic episode about cars, how cities are built around personal automobiles instead of public transportation, specifically newer cities. Too.
Look at your city. Like the old downtown is, of course, like probably in the Horst. Even my Bismarck, North Dakota, 1870 was when the 1870s when the founding was. But like the old downtown is that like much more compact town type of atmosphere, sort of planning grid. And then all these cities after that are just sprawl and sprawl and sprawl. And you look at like a city like Kansas City in 1910 versus now, the downtown area, it's just freeways now, where it used to be just this vibrant urban community. And cars have done so much. And Robert Moses is just the one we know about. One thing I forgot to say about the whole Buttigieg thing is like, Robert Moses is just the one in the major city in the country and had Robert Caro write about him. But there's minor Robert Moseses in all these cities that worked on behalf of the automobile industry to destroy cities.
Travis from Pittsburgh says, isn't the car sensors a Fourth Amendment violation since they are indiscriminately monitoring you regardless of if you are guilty of anything? I think I touched on this a little. Since it's government mandated, I feel like it would fall into that even though they don't consciously monitor that data. I mean, again, the government, that if they were concerned about Fourth Amendment things, this would be... they're not concerned about Fourth Amendment violations in mass bulk collection. Graveland, in fact, they like it, and they see it as a tool to collaborate with technologies that might be monitoring this. Graveland says, I keep batteries in my car when I lived in San Francisco to throw at bikers because they would kick your car and knock off a mirror if you were too close to the bike lane.
I'm on the team biker. I'm sorry. Like, don't throw batteries at bikers. You should give them space. I mean,
as someone who lives in New York City, I think that the bike versus car thing is kind of like a false dichotomy, because a lot of the bad behaviors that people identify from people on bikes are just like the same bad behaviors that people demonstrate in cars. But like a bike, you can't kill people with. Usually, you can't mow down like 15
space
people.
For bikes. There's no space for bikes. There's space for cars.
There's no infrastructure for bikes, and also, like, honestly, we have a very combative driving system. So, like, of course, pedestrians and people on the road see each other as in competition with each other.
Yeah.
So this in Houston, I need to pick up this story, but this happened earlier this fall. Some kid struck a whole bunch of cyclists.
Yeah.
By trying to, I forget, like, what is it called? Like dust
roll coal. I remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
He was just formally charged, actually, because it seemed like a little bit. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish. You can finish telling.
No, go ahead, Brennan.
I mean, because I remember the story when you're referring to, like, this kid, I think he's like, teenager, basically. It's a big practice, and I guess in the South, where they have those big roll calling culture of when you're behind cyclists to try to intimidate them by like revving your engine, according to like his story. And he did that and he says accidentally ran over them. And it looked like they were going to let him go with no charges for a while, but they actually just charged him, I think, with 6 counts of like, or whatever you get for accidentally running over people with your car while trying to menace them. So, like, I mean, maybe attempted manslaughter. I don't know.
Honestly, if we didn't have the Rittenhouse thing going on right now, we'd probably be hearing a lot more than that, because we had somebody saying, like, it's becoming a culture war thing in Houston, like the bikers versus the cars. And I'm sorry, like, to IMer, I'm going to be on the bike side of this war. It's not even
And here in New York City, at the very least, a lot of bikers are working class people who are delivering things to people, big gig workers. And there was a huge article that I did an interview on for the Peacock Show. I think it was for New York Magazine or the New Yorker. It was a title story. Now I'm forgetting which one. Damn it. But essentially on how these delivery drivers on bikes are in peril on a daily basis and have to form human battalions, basically, where they stave off people who are assaulting them, trying to steal from them, and of course the actual driving of the bikes in order to make these insane quotas set by these apps that don't have human interest in mind are I forget where I was going with it, but just people look up the article. It's really good.
It's definitely not safe to bike in New York City. And I mean, I think that that's just the reality of the infrastructure we've built here, like Emma was saying, and so like working on more infrastructure seems to be, right now it seems to be a displace the sort of how do we okay, so bikes aren't safe on the road. Can we displace them to the sidewalk, which I've seen a lot more of as, pandemic and more people have been biking around.
I almost got hit by a bike on the sidewalk yesterday.
Like that's just not like an acceptable solution to like there not being infrastructure in the street for bikes, if only because it just displaces the danger from like you, the biker, to the people on the sidewalk who may or may not be able to get out your way, which isn't to say the bikers are at fault.
Right. I don't even blame the biker. It's I walked, I have my headphones in listening to music. I walked a little to the left and it skimmed my ankle because I wasn't walking in a direct straight line or whatever.
Yeah, because they're whizzing past, assuming people aren't going to take one step left or right. And I assume somebody gets creamed every day.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, that also comes down to bike education in this country. Like a lot of people don't have bells. A lot of people don't know how to signal their turns just because it's like, it's just Mad Max out there.
Yeah. I'll read like 3 more and then we can do that Elaine Chow clip that the Matts are interested in listening to. Come Shower with Crowder says, I listened to Door's 2.5-hour show with Max Blumenthal last night, and he spent 99% of it talking about COVID vaccines. It's insidious, but it's almost boring AF. Yeah, Door seemingly walked back.
Door says he fired a producer over the thing, and then also says nobody reads full articles and that everybody curates.
Yes, when you do a news segment, you have to curate, which is why he changed the text of the article about vaccines in order to create a pro-vaccination article into an anti-vaccination article.
All I have to say about that is if you're the producer that was fired and you think that you were put in an unwinnable position because you had a boss that definitely wanted anti-vax shit, and when you produced it, he fired you for it, because I
don't believe he fired them.
I'm not certain there's even a producer.
Yes.
But if there is and he was fired, I imagine that he was in a position where if he went to Jimmy with, hey, actually vaccines are good and we should stop doing anti-vaccine content, that would also risk his job. So I think the boss continues to be the problem in this situation.
Yeah. Oh, good. Punching down, Jimmy. Much appreciated. Bourbon Socialist, sorry to the other IMer, but if I see a driver throwing anything at a cyclist, I will search my car for the oldest, nastiest fast food bag that's been living in my car and plaster it all over the windshield. It's amazing how our infrastructure caters to car drivers, and there's still a level of contempt some drivers have towards cyclists. If there was sustainable infrastructure for me to get to work on a bike or, heaven forbid, public transit, I would sell my car in a heartbeat. Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, I mean, I really, like... People are psychos behind the wheel of a car. When I'm walking home and it's raining and like crossing the crosswalk and someone wants to turn before I'm finishing the crosswalk, I'm just like, you're inside not getting wet, listening to music right now. Relax, you psycho. I really don't like cars.
Yeah.
I literally moved to, I could choose graduate schools in Malibu, Pepperdine, and New York University. And I picked New York because of the public transportation.
So, speaking of transportation, we should move to the former...
Oh, that's a good one.
There we go. Yeah, woo! I'm just getting to be a professional.
Got him.
Former transportation secretary under Donald Trump, and also Mitch McConnell's wife. Try to imagine that, or maybe don't. Elaine Chao, she was on Bloomberg, and she had some comments about the, quote, labor participation rate in our economy right now. It's pretty dystopian.
What's happening now is if you look at the labor participation rate, it is still very, very low. In fact, it's still about 61.6%. I mean, we have to do, we as a country have to encourage people to come back to work, because what we are seeing in the supply chain crisis is basically the lack of workers. People are not... there are not enough people to produce goods and services, and that is putting inflationary pressures on our economy.
That is not true.
At the prices that we want to pay them.
Yeah.
Me as a multi-millionaire.
This is just a way to divide the labor force, to make, same with the teacher, being anti-teacher when they were striking so kids wouldn't die of COVID-19 or get infected or some shit. Like, it's just a way to make like one part of the labor force who is able to be like that ideal consumer, be against the other part of the labor force who like they rely on to enable their ability to be that ideal consumer. It's classic.
Yeah.
Also, realize every time that she says "we," she realizes she needs to add like an addendum there. First it's "we," and then she goes, "Oh, we as a country," and then she goes "we," and then she goes, "I mean people," because people who are watching this will see where this is leading. And I guess she knew what she wanted to say and had to make sure that she wasn't included, or people like her weren't included in who she's about to talk about.
Yeah, I want to see Mitch and Elaine down at the docks helping to unload.
Yeah,
right.
She doesn't want that mental image, right, in people's minds of her and her husband twirling their mustaches, basically. I mean, and also she's wrong about the goods and services part. I guess go back a little bit, if you could, Bradley, to when she says that, because what we're seeing with the supply chain issues is an over demand for goods and less of a demand for services because there is still a pandemic going on. And basically these greedy people who like to portray themselves as above everybody else and able to see the economy in this calculated and rational way cannot seem to grasp that very fact, because they are children that want the pandemic to be over so that their pockets can be a little bit fatter, and they want to wish it away, but they're, disconnected from reality. Let's just go back a little bit.
Still about 61.6%. I mean, we have to do, we as a country have to encourage people to come back to work, because what we are seeing in the supply chain crisis is basically the lack of workers. People are not, there are not enough people to produce goods and services, and that is putting inflationary pressures on our economy, adding to the woes of the supply chain. So we really need these workers to come back. When I was Secretary of Labor, the labor participation rate was about 66.4% over a workforce of 157 million people. So we basically have 5 million people now who have basically left the workforce, and because of COVID, some people have retired early. Some people have decided not to come back. So this is a real issue. As the economy continues to recover, we're going to need these workers to do their patriotic duty to come back and help the economy to come back.
Do you think
right.
You're not willing to toil at a minimum wage job until you die of overexertion so that a middle-class family in the suburbs can get whatever they want? Or can you really claim that you care about America?
You're essentially a traitor. I mean, I would guess that you could be tried for treason under the Trump administration with her presiding as transportation secretary. But like, in all seriousness, it shows how much these people intrinsically link capitalism to nationalism, and that's what you have right there.
And why it's cross purposes with the economy, because we need to encourage people to come back to work, and also there's not enough people to come back to work. Well, what do we need to do? Clone some? Like, did we run out of people? No, you need to encourage them by paying them more. All this in the context of a freak out over, let's not let in Afghanistan refugees, let's not let in Haitian refugees. We have apparently too many people, like, as these people are also saying, we don't have enough people to do jobs. It's the nationalism, basically, a catering to white supremacy versus this sort of economics thing. It's kind of interesting how committed they are to the keeping the demographics a certain way.
Yeah,
Matt, getting
of their short-term capital gains.
Right, getting paid more to do what should be your patriotic duty. What kind of American are you?
Yeah. And that's exactly
anti-U.S. scumbag, Matt. How dare you?
That's exactly it. We're not going to pay you more. We're going to shame you by basically saying that you're unpatriotic, that you should be compelled to come to work because of some religious commitment to America, as opposed to actual incentives for you and your family, because we're not going to provide those for you.
Well, if we provided incentives for them and their family, the people who have failed our system and are therefore forced to do minimum wage as a punishment, then that would cause rising prices for people who view themselves as having succeeded our system. And that's too much of a burden for them. We have to shift everything down to the bottom level. And that's how we, are able to divide the workforce and make people go, oh, well, if we pay McDonald's servers $15 minimum wage, and my Big Mac is going to cost $1.79, and I haven't budgeted for that one, also filling up my SUV with $5 worth of, $5 a gallon worth of gas. And like, that's just supposed to be so acceptable a position for that like coddled middle class, suburban American to express that that the fact that it inconveniences everyone else around them is just too, you can't feel about that, because like that's the backbone of America.
You know what's really interesting to me? Like if there was any discussion about paying workers a fair living wage prior to March 2020, the usual thing you would hear is, shut up and be grateful that you even have a job, because your job is about to be automated away. And if you keep asking for more money, then one day a robot or a kiosk will be doing your job, server or cashier or whatever. But all of a sudden, what happened to those robots in those kiosks that apparently were waiting in the wings when we have this worker shortage? We were told that they need to be deployed and rolled out, and then the McDonald's is doing it now. Look,
what are you talking about, Matt? She's there talking to you right now.
Shit, man, what happened to supply and demand? I mean, I remember everyone loved the basic tenets of economics when we were before the pandemic, and people need to be paid $7.25 an hour to make things work. But now that there's a shortage of labor, supply and demand doesn't, that's not real. Everyone needs to do their everyone needs to do their patriotic duty. There's no such thing as supply and demand.
Yeah, and the market is clearly not fixing itself. I thought that's what it was supposed to be doing.
Just trying to, but they won't pay people more.
Just in terms of supply lines, Elaine Chow's father is funded the Foremost Group, a privately held shipping company based in New York City with subsidiaries registered in the Marshall Islands. Operates globally. Its clients include Bunge, Cargill, and Louis Dreyfus. It was founded in 1964. Anyway, $400 million. It's got a ship fleet for over $1 billion. So that's maybe why. Maybe cough up some of that $400 million, and we'll see if we can get some people down to the docks to get your ships unloaded, Miss Chow.
Yeah. All right. You want to take a phone call, Matt?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go to the phones and let's take this one right up top. First person to call in today. 913. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Dylan from St. Louis.
Hey, Dylan. What would you like to talk about today?
Yeah, I was calling because I'm a student at St. Louis University, which is a Catholic college that has a vaccine requirement, and none other than Matt Walsh is coming in a couple weeks to give a talk about pro-life issues. And I thought it was really interesting because it means either he's vaccinated, in which case, I think, his fans should know that, and, we should expose that, or it means that he's skirting these vaccine requirements while getting paid, a $10,000 speaker fee. And I think that really undercuts the idea that they're censored on college campuses.
Yes, but I think you've put it exactly right. They're either vaccinated or getting special dispensation as the special snowflakes that they are to get special treatment and opt out of public health measures. So I think that's exactly the question that I would be asking as well.
Or I would pose the question to the school: Are endangering the students, the students of the school, by allowing possibly an unvaccinated person
send an email
to just come in?
Sorry, Binder.
What was it? No, go ahead.
I just said send an email so there's a paper trail of what Binder's saying here.
Yeah, I would ask, and I would ask as many people who attend the school as well, bring it up to teachers that professors who would also have an interest in this, perhaps, and really make an issue of it. We could get to the bottom of whether Matt Walsh is vaccinated, or if your university has decided that Matt Walsh is so important to hear from that we can risk letting this unvaccinated person on the campus as a special favor to him. Special treatment, VIP, roll out the red carpets for Matt Walsh. Very important person to listen to.
Yes, absolutely. And I think a good follow-up question is how many players in the Tennessee Titans can you name? Since he's such a macho man.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. So. That is definitely do that. I wonder if I could how many I could name off the top of my head. Should I try? See if he can match it.
My first trainer, like gym trainer,
see. Yeah,
played for Tennessee Titans.
Give me a number. Give me a number here so I can bring it up.
Okay, Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, AJ Brown, Julio Jones, Jeffrey Simmons, Caleb Farley. No, damn it, that right tackle went to play for the Browns, Jack Conklin. Kamiko Autry.
That's 7. He's not going to be able to beat
all right,
7.
Cool. 7. All right.
I think that was 14, so I think we're good.
Sounds good. Oh, and also there's a third option. I think there are a lot of celebrities and rich people with fake vaccine cards. We'll never be able to prove it, but I have heard through the grapevine about certain people that may rhyme with. No, I'm not going to say that, actually.
What does it rhyme with? Many things rhyme. I need to know. What does it rhyme with?
Justin Schmieber, maybe. I heard a rumor through somebody. But anyway,
I also have something. I think that the people that are operating the fake vaccine card things, I think the reason they aren't being busted by the police is because it's cops that are doing it. I think cops are giving out these cards. That's just my conspiracy theory. If we're just airing them, so.
All right. Thanks so much for the call. Really
like how we just throw
it.
out like scoops for journalists to maybe follow up on and prove us right or wrong.
And call us back if you were able to figure this out, or your follow through with the Matt Walsh subterfuge.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a good day.
See you later. Bye. Talk to you later. Jesus. Not enough cashews for me quite yet. All right. I'm going to read some more IMs, get to some more clips. White Sexual Chocolate says, I think Sam and David Pakman could settle things with an oil wrestling match. It might not solve anything, but it would be sexy. Ooh-wee. That sounds disgusting.
I'm going to take that day off.
Yeah.
Turkish oil wrestling is the sport of kings, obviously.
MAGA McCain, the other day on the way to work, a driver ran a red light, crossed 3 lanes of traffic as I was walking my bike across the street, bumping my front tire only to be stuck at another red light. This was in front of a police station where cops were walking on the sidewalk. Nobody noticed or seemed to care. As I got to the other side of the street, I was nearly run down by a delivery guy on an e-bike. Crickets from cops. Moral of the story? I don't know. Says MAGA McCain.
Moral of the story, be careful out there.
Yeah. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator Elaine Chao is Terry Crews without the charisma and toxic positivity.
And a lot more money. I mean, Terry Crews looks to me like somebody who needs to earn money. Elaine Chao looks to me like somebody who has always had money and wants to keep it that way.
Goofy Nonsense says it's Jimmy's wife. He fired his wife.
I can't have stupid things like that happening. I don't know where this stupidness came from. Somehow stupidness got into this office and we're going to get it out of here.
Red Delicious Supremacist, driving around NYC is my Vietnam. All right.
That's a bit of an
exaggeration. Goofy Nonsense says, I grew up in a medium-sized town in Texas. People used to roll coal and constantly blast me when I worked for Liberty Taxes, the Lady Liberty costume sign holder. It was depressing. That is sounds...
It's assholes.
It's out of a
Sounds like a great metaphor for people who say they believe in freedom.
Right. Oh, yes. All right, let's turn to, we have a lot of great clips today, in particular, in my opinion. All right, we'll take a little bit of a victory lap here on our Astro World coverage. If you guys recall, we on this program were deeply skeptical of police's claims that there was a prick in the neck of one of the security officers working at Astroworld, and that the security guard had to be revived with Narcan, and that the reason for the mass deaths at this festival had nothing to do with security not doing their job, cops not doing their jobs, event organizers not doing their jobs. There was a rogue individual pricking people with fentanyl, because that's how it works.
Otherwise, it would have been all okay. It would have
been fine.
Yeah,
that's actually my strategy when I play Hitman 3. You know, when I have an assassination mission, I just go around pricking people with fentanyl to cause riots, and then
It makes sense. I mean, the thing is they claim that the cop or security officer had to be revived with Narcan, but now they're basically saying there was a mistake, because fentanyl is the police's Havana syndrome, but with less plausible deniability, because people like ourselves were raising skepticism about this. Here is, I think, the Houston police chief explaining actually what happened.
If you can remember, members of the medical team in the medical tent said that a male security guard had come in and said that somebody had pricked his neck, and we felt that it could have been something ingested. We did locate that security guard. His story is not consistent with that. He says he was struck in his head. He went unconscious. He woke up in the security tent. He says that no one injected drugs in him. So we want to clear that part up.
Oh, good thing you spread that before, checking with the guy, right? Really responsible detective work there.
And good work by the media for saying fentanyl, breathlessly reporting this as fact.
Yeah, like we heard this thing that was really convenient for us as a propaganda vehicle, and we used it like that. And then after it basically served that purpose, we went back and checked it, and it was, as everybody predicted, a lie that basically got the attention off of our failings and the corporate sponsor who we have a close relationship with, their failings in adequately providing security for a concert that you knew there was going to be, because of people have pointed out with Travis Scott, issues with security and people being safe in the crowd. And this is the cops covering for whoever was this, whoever put whatever corporate sponsor put on this festival.
All right, yeah. Well, so that was really just an update.
I mean, we've seen this time and time again. This is nothing new. Cops lie, or being generous here, irresponsibly float conspiracy theories that really should be looked into before announcing them to the public. If you do believe that such a thing is occurring, this is something you should probably get pretty solid, rock solid confirmation for before letting the public know something like this. But we've seen time and time again that this happens over and over again. I mean, we saw this, what was it? I'm trying to think. There's like a number of famous incidents where this happened. Oh, here's the one where there was the Shake Shack employees in downtown Manhattan that had allegedly poisoned the police that came and got a milkshake, and it turned out to be completely untrue. Yet the second the report came down the line, this was spread throughout the news. The unions were saying this. The Shake Shack employees later on in their lawsuit came out to say how like dozens of police filled their place of employment and treated them like they were like criminals for something they didn't do, and they were like basically being like treated like terror suspects or something like that. Like it was insanity, and it turned out to be completely false.
I remember when the cops shot their own dog and then raised money for it and pretending it was somebody else, which I mean, when there's a dog shot, and the cops are involved in any way, or you got to assume it was them. But like, yeah, they lie all the time, and the media is quick to report it because they want to have access to whatever police say, generally speaking. Like they want that sort of access that we were talking about earlier. And so this sort of ebb and flow of like, oh, they said that, I don't know, that they're dusting weed with fentanyl, and we busted that up. And also like one of our officers touched it and like overdosed just from like seeing it or some shit. Like people are quick to report that, because what if next time they're not lying, and we need them to have, we need their sort of we need their insight into something. It's a complete grift, to borrow legitimacy.
It inflates the dangers of cops in this case a security guard, but like cop adjacent in this way. It inflates the danger of their job. I mean,
the leading killer of cops is cops. Like, a cop just died in, I think, San Francisco or something, from being unvaccinated and dying of COVID-19 after like protesting not being vaccinated, which, so now that COVID-19 is the leading killer of cops, it's just, essentially edged out the other leading killer of cops before that, which was like friendly fire or traffic accidents or something.
Yeah. That was
suicides.
a rare Saki bomb that actually did had its desired effect, where Peter Ducey was talking about how everyone's going to be in danger, and more cops are going to be in danger from these mass resignations due to vaccination requirements. And yeah, I mean, she pointed out COVID, #1 killer of cops now. Cops lie all the time. Story just came out a few weeks ago in Staten Island. A conviction was thrown out because a cop was found on his body cam planting cannabis in this man's car a few years ago. So any media source that is breathlessly reporting or republishing what cops are saying and taking it as value without any evidence, I mean, it's the same inclination with when they do that with the Pentagon. They should not be taken seriously. It's not, that's not reporting. That's just essentially being a propagandist. And of course, obviously, a few days later, it's contradicted by the own cops.
There's some good reporting by the Rolling Stone by Nancy Dillon. Astroworld security firm scrutinized for super rushed hiring. It felt like they just needed bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the article that people should be talking about, not satanic shit, not like how much of a degree of a psychopath is Travis Scott. Like, this is the problem. You have this company, CSC Staffing, Contemporary Services Corp, and they're photographed, fingerprinted, and asked to take a state licensing, blah, blah, blah. If you look at my resume, I only have hospitality and a retail experience, Williams 32 tells Rolling Stone. It felt like they just needed bodies, like they were hiring anyone who passed a background test. And this is the problem. Like, and this is not the first time this company has had issues with gates being rushed because they don't have enough people with the commensurate experience to deal with this stuff. This is the malfeasance here. This is what should be the focus. And it's depressing to the degree to which like people want to play into like what people are doing by focusing on like Satanism or this conspiratorial stuff is just the same thing the cops are doing. It's displacing blame from these literal corporations that are responsible for people being dead right now.
Yep.
Right. Absolutely.
Giga Daniel Ocean, Astroworld is playing out just like the Hillsborough disaster in 1989. South Yorkshire police leaked false stories to the media to try to depict the crowd as uncontrollable. It's victim blaming. At Atrum, Brandon is too real about cop shooting dogs. I yelled.
It's their favorite pastime. I mean, besides, obviously shooting themselves and each other.
Yeah, was it like
black people?
I think Rob Rousseau had somebody had, maybe Jordan Uhl, I can't remember, but they had a thread of different canine deaths. And if you read closer, they died because of friendly fire.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah,
right, they send the dog after the guy, and then they put out their gun to shoot him. They're putting their dog right in the way of the gunfire. I mean, that's what happens. So I mean, no doubt they're going to be shooting the dogs that they are on their side or whatever. Like, it's unbelievable.
I generally just disagree with like giving police dogs or animals at all because they're just clearly abusing them. The way they train them is, arguably abuse because they condition them to be incredibly violent and aggressive towards things that are, the citizenry. And I can't believe that they treat them well on the back end either because they're canines or whatever, especially since they shoot them so often.
Yeah, but then they can arrest people for dogfighting.
And same with like the police horses, like that stuff is just so, I think I'm not, like I said, we've talked about it. I'm not like an animal rights person normally, but like seeing a horse in a riot control situation is very just sad to me.
Yes.
It's also disturbing in the sense that a horse, all it takes is one of those horses to buck when there's someone standing behind them, and that person could easily die.
Well, it's like there was riots in or like protests in London, and one of the horses got spooked and it ran, and like the cop riding it got smashed on a sign. And it's like, what do you expect? You bring a animal into a situation like this, and like I don't know. It makes me sad, I guess is what I want.
Yeah, it's traumatic for the animal. Anyway. Let's do a short clip here, and then we can take some more calls, because the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, obviously one of the top stories today. We opened the show with it. There are many hot takes in this new IDW adjacent ecosystem, which now includes the most progressive candidate in the race, pro Medicare for all, Tulsi Gabbard, who had this to say about Kyle Rittenhouse and the trial, which she tweeted out as she like dips even further into the uncanny valley. I don't know where she's coming from, like some sort of upside down space, but here she is creeping everybody out.
The prosecutor in this Rittenhouse trial obviously did not do his due diligence before making the decision to prosecute. This tragedy never would have happened if the government had simply carried out its responsibilities to protect the safety, lives, and property of innocent people.
Property.
Right.
Yeah, the emphasis on property is the same emphasis that Rittenhouse had when he actually went and killed those people. He wanted to protect property. That was his explicit desire. And it goes to show that, one, many of us, including Michael, including Matt, including myself, and Anna Kasparian, were right about her for quite a while. And also the fact that fascism, you can't be pro-fascist in India and anti-fascist in the United States. She has a record of supporting authoritarian crackdowns by governments, and she was able to be a bit more transient here in U.S. political spaces, but her politics are this. And so that's why she's able to appeal to the right so fluidly, because this is exactly, what her inclination is. Protect property. Oh, thank you. Most progressive candidate. Thank you so much, Tulsi.
And it's retconning what happened last year into this thing that, as if like Trump just allowed the protests to get out of hand, as if they weren't organic protests aimed at like real issues this country's dealing with, that Tulsi does not speak to at all, because she'd rather put them down with, the troops or the cops, because she loves those people.
I mean, I feel like anyone who caters to the far right, media sphere is having a difficult time now while pretending like they believe the Kyle Rittenhouse, like it proves that the law is, capable of delivering justice in a coherent way, while simultaneously arguing that the people who were storming the Capitol on January 6th deserve some kind of like special dispensation for like being confused, right? Like they, we've always known that that people believe that the law is meant to be a tool to keep those traditionally without power in their place at the expense of, social good. But watching people like go that, oh, well, everyone who's mad that the judge isn't going to be fair in this trial, or that like the prosecution has had the case largely stacked against them by disallowing evidence that is completely germane to like what happened, is also trying to probably pretend that like, well, but those people who like the criminal justice system, what they're doing to J6 people, that's not fair. That's an example of an overreach.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, again, this is not her first foray into siding with the police and the military in a variety of instances. She was explicitly pro-torture for a while. She's shown a deference to authorities like the police for quite a while, and I think that is a explicitly anti-leftist posture, and indicative of the kind of audience that she's appealing to. And you're seeing right now, by the way, Greenwald, that entire crowd parroting this very similar narrative about Kyle Rittenhouse that we're going to have to start combating. Yeah, very similar. So, unfortunate, but, I don't even know if these people still have leftist audiences, but
I'm a little confused.
They move some people, which is what scares me.
I guess I'm just a little bit confused as to what the argument that they're trying to make is, because ultimately I kind of expected this, because we know that the law in this country, at least the way it's used, regardless of how it's written, is meant to enable this kind of like violence to be targeted against people of color, against people without means to redress these grievances legally, the poor, the disenfranchised. And so like using the Kyle Rittenhouse trial as though it proves some kind of viability of the system, or that liberals are, hypocrites for not wanting to, for believing that the system can deliver some just results. It's like, I just think that we've gotten to the point where general antagonism towards what can be described as like an SJW left that may or may not exist is just so acceptable that the incoherence of their own ideas is just completely like completely just left without any kind of real need to address. Like, I mean, if you think that Kyle Rittenhouse, this is not like a carriage of justice, or that our system is capable of delivering this justice. I would wonder, I mean, I thought Tulsi was like pro Julian Assange. I thought she was like pro Edward Snowden. Does she think that they should come back and become, should submit themselves to the American justice system in some real way? Do the people who are like defending our legal system now think that it's different? Or like, I'm just don't understand like how we get to this point where, people are just allowed to talk out of both sides of their mouth about what is essentially a system that is incapable of delivering any kind of real justice.
Yeah, and then, I mean, a lot of the same critics are basically calling the left hypocritical for wanting justice in the Rittenhouse case, but being in favor of criminal justice reform and largely not being in favor of mass incarceration, where I'm in favor of that as a holistic overhaul and a systemic one. But the hypocrisy is also relevant that, by the way, Rittenhouse will probably get off based on the posture of the judge and what we've seen so far. It's quite likely at this point. And it's incredibly instructive to point out that a black kid or a non-white kid in his situation would not be met with the same response. And that's a separate point to a policy one, which is a criminal justice overhaul.
I mean, people say it's hypocritical for the left. And again, you got to give them at least at least allow for the fact that they've been able to find somebody online on Twitter who claims to be a leftist who has expressed these views. But I don't think it's incompatible at all to say that people, generally speaking, the far right of this country who promote our incredibly corrupt, incredibly, unjust criminal justice system are the people you should be least worried about becoming victims of it, just because like that's what they support. Like there's no crying about cops going to jail because like, oh, that's incompatible with, prison abolition or whatever people, whatever lazy ideas people have about criminal justice reform is interesting, but like they're the ones who support that system, not me. If it were up to me, no one would go to jail, but they're the ones arguing that some people should go to jail. So when it's them, I don't feel like it's incompatible with my ideology to like not prioritize them.
Yeah, I mean, it's purposefully conflating the individual with the systemic, which is a right-wing ploy altogether. All right, folks, we're gonna take a quick call.
Let's do it.
Maybe. And a few more, read some IMs, do some more clips, and we'll wrap at 2:30.
Sure. Let's take this one. 979. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Howdy, guys. This is Blake from Central Texas. How are y'all today?
Hi, Blake. I'm doing well. What would you like to talk about today?
I wanted to see if any of y'all had caught Dr. Wolf's appearance on the Jimmy Dore show. And if you had, can you help me make sense of the argument he was trying to put forward?
I did not. Did any of you guys catch?
No, I mean, no, we didn't watch it.
Who's appearing on the Jimmy Dore show?
Richard Wolff.
Richard
Wolff.
I mean, we commented on it before that, but we didn't. Well, it was important enough to watch, frankly.
Okay. Well, essentially, I felt like the argument he was trying to put forward was that leftists should oppose vaccine mandates by employers on principle because it's in the employer's interest, which I'm not really understanding. Matt, if you could help me out from
a more
materialist perspective.
He's wrong, I guess. Like I don't think that I mean, maybe there's something that I'm missing, but I don't buy that remotely. Like I think, frankly, Chomsky's position is entirely correct on it. Like you can't oppose. Like first of all, I don't really understand how. Like it's all entirely confused. You cannot take a position that has. It's basically a right to work position, right? Like right to work without a union, same thing. Right to work without a vaccination. Yeah. That's how I view this, and I'm frankly not interested, and I hope Wolf gets off it. Like I don't want to like direct more like negative attention to Wolf. I just think he's wrong about this. I respect a lot of his work, but I don't think it's that interesting.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm a fan of both of y'all, and I was more or less just trying to see if anyone can make sense of the strategic aspect of it, or I don't know. But I appreciate y'all's input, and I'll let you go.
Yeah, I just think it's yeah. I don't know. Do you guys have anything on that?
I don't.
Not that we haven't said already.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for the call. Do you guys want to go to one more call? Being that was fairly short.
Sure.
Let's do it. Let's
Actually, can I just make one more point that I always say, which is that, like, again, as we've said, even when Kyrie was going through this stuff, the requirement to get a biomedical intervention to have to go out and work, that is part of the totality of coercion that workers are placed at in this country. And I think on a very, like, in a vacuum, I think we can acknowledge that. And if that's all that Wolf was arguing, then I think that's fine. But where you emphasize that over other people's right to have a vaccinated workplace that they also have to go to, and make sure that people are protecting them from the virus as much as they can, I think you have to go with those workers over the ones that want to, because they've been misled about vaccine safety, want to endanger everybody else.
I mean, I agree with you, man. I think that this is sort of an example of what we were just talking about with the, Tulsi Gabbard clip as well, where people who want to, acknowledge, people who otherwise would not acknowledge or give credence to any kind of leftism, broadly speaking, want to acknowledge a narrow slice of what they feel like our ideology is, and like demand that we account for why we don't care about that narrow slice. And it's like, well, because there are other considerations. Besides, like, the one time you want to acknowledge prison is bad, or that like the right to work is bad.
Yeah. Let's take another call.
Yeah, let's 386. What's your name? Where are you calling from? 386.
Hi, this is B from Queens.
Hi, B. How are you? What would you like to talk about today?
I'm well, thank you. I hope Emma remembers me.
Of course.
From previous calls.
Of course.
Great. I wanted to thank you personally for your guys' coverage about Dennis Prager and his asinine comments comparing people who are refusing to get vaccinated to what happened to people during the AIDS crisis, especially as someone who's HIV positive, and as someone who's a little annoyed at other left outlets for not being careful with the way they talk and conflating, gay men at large with HIV/AIDS, that whole thing. But I really appreciate the way you spoke about it, because that got me real pissed. But I've been trying to call in for a while to say, what's stopping Biden? Well, I know what's stopping him, but couldn't he theoretically, through just executive orders as the commander-in-chief, since the Pentagon themselves has said that the climate emergency is our #1 national security threat, couldn't he just write a bunch of sweeping executive orders ordering the military to perform essentially a new WPA, where they've got people from the military who are like a military industrial corps that's building, roads with stops along the way for plugging in your electric car, and we're erecting these windmills along the shoreline, in conjunction with the Navy and whatnot. Like, if the Pentagon budget is going to be so overinflated, why doesn't Biden just order them to direct those funds towards the #1 emergency in their estimation? And if they won't do it, tell them they have to do an audit.
Well, I mean, that's I think that's a strong suggestion if Biden wasn't so opposed to pretty much most executive actions at this point.
Well, he's opposed to also legislative ones.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
they have Congress and they could pass something, and they're not doing that way. And he also, doesn't seem to be very.
Well, that's why I say this, because Congress is clearly useless at this point.
Right, but almost like for the same reason, it's useless because the person at the top is asleep. And that's the exact same person that is would be writing all these executive orders. And Biden doesn't have an appetite for a change like that. He just doesn't. He wants to keep things sailing as smoothly as he imagines it possible. But actually using the military or even Congress to structurally transform this country isn't something that, to me, he's seemed to even consider at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I think that
But I'm saying, would it be easier to pressure him to do those executive orders rather than trying to pressure all of Congress to grow a conscience?
Perhaps. I mean, I think that could be a useful pressure. Say, if the Democrats lose the Senate or the House, which is looking likely at this point, I think he would be a lot more amenable to those arguments, kind of in the way Obama was towards the end of his presidency. When you're able to make legacy arguments, then they're a bit more willing to use executive action.
True.
That makes sense, B?
Yeah. I was just thinking that, like, if only.
I know.
Competency. We're not asking for much.
Right. I know.
I would also just add to what everyone has said so far. And this is a good question that, like, largely speaking, the national security part of the climate change argument is just, it's a grift. It's a grift to funnel more money to the Pentagon to do what the Pentagon is already doing under a slightly different mandate. And, what we're more likely to see is the Pentagon start to do, neo-imperialism, neo-colonialism under the guise of needing to manage the resources of places that would otherwise, pollute or do non-environmentally friendly by our definition things with them, so like a seamless switch from like, okay, they're not managing their oil, or rather they're not using their oil at all, to that's why we have to invade them to get access to their oil, to now they are using their oil, that's why we have to invade them to get access to that oil and stop it. So I think we're much more likely to see like the national security grift do what it's always done, fuel like a imperialist narrative.
Yeah. It just seems so simple to just bring all the troops home from wherever they are and put them to work at home. But, that would be common sense, I guess.
It would be.
There's no room for that on Capitol Hill.
Appreciate it, B. Have a good one, all right?
You too.
Yeah, we can't have people here like, climate proofing our sort of infrastructure. We need them infiltrating China and Nicaragua.
And also on covert missions in Somalia. And
why don't we make the troops fill the supply chain problems? Why don't they work at the Walmarts and deliver the milk?
If it's that big of an issue, it's probably a good point.
They signed up. Their job is patriotism.
I mean, that might actually happen. It literally happened in the hospitals. So we have good guards people to help cover shifts.
Yeah. Gonna read some more IMs.
A listener messaged me to say that they're disappointed we haven't mentioned Ahmaud Arbery, the trial going on
that is a good point.
Georgia. I definitely a good point, but I think the reason why the Rittenhouse trial is getting so much attention is because with the Arbery case, it appears that the outrage was well placed in the fact that it seemed like there wasn't going to be a trial. But now that there is a trial, from what I've been reading and paying attention to, it seems to be going about in a fairly, reasonable manner. And it's not looking good for the guys who plotted to kill Arbery. And that's justice. With Rittenhouse, though, this judge is obviously causing all this media attention by being so blatantly against the prosecution. And like, honestly, like did you guys see the clip going around earlier today about how he asked if there were any veterans in the court, and the one veteran in the court was Rittenhouse's defense's next witness, and then they proceeded to applaud, jurors included, for yes.
I didn't see that. No, I mean,
yes.
Just to touch, I mean, that's insane.
Cuck Nation.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, it's Veterans Day, so that's the context behind that, but Cuck Nation. Exactly.
I'm going to watch United States of Al to support the veterans.
The whole thing there, though, is obviously this next witness for Rittenhouse is obviously an upstanding patriot who's going to, everything he says is going to be the God honest, 100% factual truth because he's a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's how the jurors are going to view it, obviously.
Yeah, if a lawyer had done that in any way, the judge would be sanctioning the prosecution for trying to sway the jury. But because he does it, he's judge, jury, and executioner, no, pun intended, basically. But on the Arbery trial, for people who are curious about just some of the facts, I've been following it a little. Essentially, the killers, their initial claims that they had told police that they were trying to conduct a citizen's arrest, that they were trying to apprehend him in a nonviolent manner, basically, and that they thought he was committing a crime had been contradicted by those very cops that they had an interaction with. So in terms of a trial going in the direction of justice, as Matt said, we got a little bit more faith in this one. But
the issue was that the issue in the first place that got so much attention was it seemed like there wasn't going to even be a trial because the three individuals involved with killing Arbery had like connections and like I forget if it was political connections or with law enforcement. I can't recall which, but once the trial got going and all this information's coming out, it seems like, this is going to be in the favor of justice, whereas this Rittenhouse case seriously is looking like a whole shit show.
Sammy Key writes in, where was Tulsi filming that? Looks like Don Corleone's backyard. That's a good reference.
She's on maneuver somewhere in the Horn of Africa.
Exactly right. She cannot disclose her location because in the other hand, she's holding
surrounded by operators.
Yeah, some sort of deadly weapon as she combats ISIS or whatever she says that she's doing.
Are we sure that was really Tulsi though? I felt like it was a little bit off, being that she didn't open up the video with her typical aloha to let us all know that, by the way, she's Hawaiian.
Yeah, it's a good point, Matt. We don't necessarily know. This could be kind of an Avril Lavigne situation where she got replaced midway through her career. That and Paul McCartney, obviously. So Gigi Palin, I thought Brandon would totally hop in on that conspiracy theory, but regardless.
But the only body doubles I'm interested in are Melania's. The endless stream of women who looked nothing like her or each other.
Yeah, it is kind of weird. There was one that she looked off in, but is that something you actually subscribe to?
That they weren't the same person?
Yes.
I mean, does it matter?
I guess it doesn't. I kind of felt that way when those stories came out, so I'm looking for a credible authority.
I mean, certainly they weren't Melania. Whether or not they were all the same person otherwise, I think, doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sammy Key, where was I? Wait, I already read that one. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator, honestly seeing Rittenhouse cry, in quotes, on the stand had the same energy as that cop crying in her car because she was afraid of McDonald's poisoning her food because she had to wait for her Egg McMuffin. These are the last people that should own firearms.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a good lesson that tears aren't always sympathetic.
Yeah.
There was a moment in that clip where, he's doing his whole blubbering thing. And then the judge starts talking and like he drops the act so he can hear the judge, and he completely turns completely quietly, no more crying. And then once he listens to the judge, he goes back into it. It was strong. Like I'm going to age myself here maybe, but maybe not because it's obviously reruns. But there's this like episode of the Brady Bunch where Carol Brady rear ends like this guy, and he shows up at court. Like it was like a fender bender, and he shows up at court with like a neck brace, claiming like he's super injured and everything. And then towards the end of the trial, where it looks like the judge is going to rule in his favor, her husband throws a briefcase on the floor, and the guy turns his neck, all startled, showing that he was faking it and he wasn't injured. It gave me strong feelings in terms of like that's how that whole thing played out there on the stand with Rittenhouse when he was doing his whole acting gig.
Bourbon Socialist, Brandon is 1,000% or 100,000% correct about police dogs. I'm a positive reinforcement dog trainer, and I have witnessed police dog training methods firsthand. They are so heavy-handed and brutal with these dogs, and oftentimes the officers are unable to control them. It's sickening that these dogs have no choice but to be attack dogs for the state.
Absolutely. Honestly, animal rights is not the issue here. It's like, they're living creatures. They shouldn't be deadly weapons and to help, a domestic, I'll be honest, a domestic terrorist force harass people.
Yeah. Bradley is daddy writes in, I challenge Matt to a boxing match. Stop ducking me, Matt. We'll do huge numbers, bro. I don't know which Matt you're referring.
Matt, yeah. Maybe we get to do a triple threat, three-way battle or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm not a fighter. I'll play you in basketball, though.
White communist.
I'll fight you.
Yeah, all right, then we have the answer. White communist says the geography of American cities is a physical imprint of an apartheid society. After defeating Nazi Germany's evil racial engineering, the U.S. government racially engineered suburbs designed for our own master race, so-called white people. Many people exist of the few Many photos exist of the few African Americans who got such homes surrounded by violent mobs of hundreds of their own neighbors. White flight was never about fear. They had no problem in downtown Chicago when gangsters had names like Capone, and the murder rate was 50% higher than the 90s. It's apartheid.
Correct. Yep.
I would just, I would just emphasize that the Nazis were inspired by American systems before they, of genocide of Native Americans and also genocide of, slave populations, et cetera, as well as their own concentration camps that existed in Africa before the ones in Europe.
Yep.
So it's like, it's really more of a cycle.
And Trauma, as a Virginian, I largely agree with your take on the political landscape. I do want to emphasize how polarized it is between urban and rural areas, though. Many rural communities are extremely red, while cities like here in Richmond are very blue. Same story with my old hometown of Harrisonburg and the surrounding Rockingham County. Not necessarily unique relative to other states, but definitely a contrast worth noting. I appreciate it. Yes. All right, let's take one more call. I think that can be our final call of the day. Sound good, Matt?
All right. Yeah, sounds good. Let's go to the phones. Let's take this one here. 718. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Matt, and I'm from Wilmington, North Carolina, by way of New York.
How you doing, Matt? What would you like to talk about?
Well, I'd like to say thank you to the Majority Report for mentioning the Massacre of 1898, the anniversary being yesterday.
Of course.
And that there is a lot of activism going on currently in Wilmington, as there is throughout the country. The Proud Boys showed up to a Board of Education meeting for the new Hanover County School District the night before the anniversary.
Jeez.
And I know this isn't any different from anywhere else that this is going on, but the city dropped a lot of anniversary social media the day of the anniversary, but did not condemn the Proud Boys.
Of course. So this is Wilmington, you said?
Our local activists have, sorry.
Is this Wilmington, you said?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've been to Wilmington. Doesn't really shock me when it comes to the way that cops respond here, or the authorities respond.
Yeah. It's unfortunate of all days for them not to, the mayor, the police, anyone. It's probably because the Proud Boys show up when there is the protection of, these places. But I just want to say thanks again. Please keep on mentioning Wilmington. And there's a wonderful councilman named Kevin Spears that I think is worth the Majority Report's time. His father did a lot of discovery of the coup, which was covered up for so long. And I think he would be a great voice for the Majority Report airwaves.
Michael Spears?
Kevin Spears. Councilman Kevin Spears.
Sorry. Michael Spears is...
just one...
Yeah, go on.
Sorry. And I know I'm talking over you. I just want to say real quick, I really appreciate all the little baseball Easter eggs that are presented in the Majority Report. I play on a baseball team called the Port City Pickles. We're a radical baseball team that emphasizes diversity. Guys, girls, boyfriends, girlfriends, anyone that wants to show up.
Nice.
We represent the Doc Ellis League, and we like to microdose. So if you guys ever want to come down and play some baseball, more than welcome.
That sounds incredible. All right. I love all of that. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
I just joined the Majority Report this week and tried to, get on the Discord to just give you this info. I can't believe I'm on the phone. I used to call screen for Sam at Air America. This is just, what a moment.
Oh, wow.
Wow, you're an OG.
Well, I was just like a brat, but I was on the softball team with Chuck D, and I got to do a lot of cool stuff there. And, I just call, I a couple times, nothing crazy, but it's just wonderful to check in and see the Majority Report just rocking and rolling. You guys, the front three, have been amazing today. I think your chemistry is really coming along the last few months, and I'm a big fan of Matt Leck. Just keep on rocking. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Microdosing playing baseball sounds amazing.
I'm also a fan of Matt Leck.
Yeah, he's a good guy, that Matt Leck.
Yeah. Super tall, though.
Yeah.
Very intimidating.
And long flowing hair these days.
Yeah.
Longer than me? It's about the same length. Oh, he wants to show it off.
Oh, here we go.
Show
There
off
we
those
go.
locks, those full voluptuous locks,
Oh, wow.
like twins.
Pretty close actually. No.
Oh, with the white shirt and everything, giving off real Andrew WK vibes over here.
Matching. We're matching. All right, guys.
Yeah, I wish I could grow my hair like that. My hair, when it reaches a certain point, it starts to get wavy and curl upwards, and that's when I gotta cut it because I can't pull off the long like professional wrestling mane. I wish I could.
Yeah, I mean Matt's pulling it off, and he has.
He is.
He took off his like Chicago Bulls snapback. That was pretty fire in and of itself. So.
I mean, you say Andrew WK, but I was thinking Danzig when I saw him. I was like, oh, like there's Glenn.
That too, but I think he Matt might have to take your shirt off to give off the Danzig vibes.
Glenn Danzig. Yeah, I've done the thing with like the widow's peak straight down the face. Yeah.
I don't know. This is all lost on me. Is this wrestling?
No, Danzig's punk, horror singer type. I'm trying to explain it to you.
On Guitar Hero.
Yeah, gotcha. Oh, he's on Guitar Hero. Well, I would know that. Yeah. Yeah.
Danzig is the lead singer of the Misfits and Sam Hain or whatever. I don't know how they pronounce it. The band name pronounces it versus like the actual holiday.
White communist. Oh wait, I already read this. Sandy Martin on the subject of the military. The point to refocusing the funding and development in the military. The biggest problem is all the private contracts that the military uses. All contracts need to be cut in the military as needs to be competitive to civilian jobs in terms of innovation. When this is accomplished, then the people need to make the Senate enforce the green change in the military. There's a little, I think you might have had some typos, but I think I get what you're saying. I5, Kyle Rittenhouse's body posture was wrong. When you cry, your body posture collapses. You break down and cry. Rittenhouse keeps doing his weird pointing thing, hand positioned stiffly in the air. Bad acting. I mean, I don't know. Although I think we would probably need David Cross to come back on, and he's a body language expert, obviously. Maybe he can look at it. Jerem Clean, new law in Singapore. Refuse to get vaccinated and get treated like an American. They will have to pay for their own healthcare costs if they catch COVID. I don't know if I agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is I'm pretty sure maybe this has changed, but I think like China's made a point of being entirely voluntary with regards to the vaccine, but probably because they have a stronger state in other ways. But yeah, I mean, these sorts of things, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to criticize another country too much. I'm more about America. Personally.
Sam's soft-collared shtick. I think New York State just outlawed and market exhaust mods. Coal rollers are D-bags extraordinaire. After market exhaust mods?
Yeah, like changing your exhaust system on your car.
Okay.
It's interesting. I didn't know that contributed to. The only time I ever looked at aftermarket exhaust was when I wanted to put it on my Honda Accord in high school, so it would look cool. But I didn't know that it helps in rolling coal.
We're gonna do like 5 more, and then maybe we'll just peace out. I have that power. Train Boy, really appreciate the anti-car discourse on the show. I feel very seen. Yes, Train Boy, this is your moment. Godcat, Automation Junction, what's your function? Broadcasting live from the future gulag. Ario Seco, tiny home village for the unhoused. Black Marxist, sorry, but the left needs to be smarter about cultural issues. The Hawley talk about masculinity will resonate with the middle of the road people. People still see men as providers with traditional roles. Don't just laugh off his comments.
I don't
agree with that.
I think that's a bit of a reduction of what Hawley was saying, which is like, I don't think appealing to people being anti-video games and anti-pornography is just politically a winner. I think it wasn't good for Tipper Gore and Hillary Clinton in the 90s. I don't think it's going to be good for Josh Hawley now, but maybe it does appeal to normal people around you, but normal people from the ones that I know in North Dakota and in New York don't want to ban video games or pornography, or like often look at those things as anything more than symptoms of a society that's devoid of meaning as opposed to the cause of it.
I also don't think that I was dismissive of that in our conversation about it. I think I pointed out that he was trying to appeal to the same crowd that was effectively appealed to under Steve Bannon's I guess leadership or his influence with Donald Trump. So he's trying to tap back into that, but also take the evangelical crowd, which he'll have to fight with Ted Cruz over.
Yeah, but
2024.
Like, you can't do that. Like Trump never, like, yeah, you guys, we need to do the Puritan stuff. Like, we love that. Like, no, that was Trump had 0% of that. That's old news, I think.
Yeah, but the froggy online alt-right types he was able to appeal to through, I mean, I don't know, but I guess that's a separate conversation based on what you're tapping into. MAGA McCain. Oh, wait, I already read that. Florida Femme. Next thing we're going to hear is there's going to be a new workers branch of the military contracted out to Amazon to do their patriotic duty. Godcat says, crew, I know you've been so busy, but can we do a Brokeback America / Planet Pod series starting with the GOP Alpha Cash Master Findom of Twitter? Emma, your comments yesterday are vital to the fragile public mind. None of that made any sense to me. But I agree with my comments being vital to the public mind.
I agree with the public mind being fragile.
That too. All right, 3 more. Goofy nonsense. I grew up in a medium-sized town in Texas. People used to roll coal. I already said that. See, I'm exhausting the IMs. Here's one from Kowalski from Nebraska. A lot of people are talking about the inflation problems that are occurring, but like your guest said, and as I've been telling many, due to the high leverage many people in the agricultural field having high inflation is not necessarily a bad thing, since it will inherently make our debts cheaper. Yes, I pointed that out. Now, personally, I do not believe that this is high inflation so much as supply chain issues. For instance, fertilizer prices are going sky high, not because it's hard to make it or something, it's because most of it comes from China, and those supply chains are still really messed up. Those fertilizer prices are tied pretty much in lockstep with energy prices due to the massive bailout the oil industry gets every year with subsidies, and combined with a lack of demand last year, production is still down. We literally incentivized them not to pump oil in 2020. Biden could threaten to open the strategic reserves of oil tomorrow, and the price of gasoline would plummet, but he's not going to do that due to corporate interests. The big lesson to take away from this is that our economy needs to be more redundant and effective as opposed to being efficient, because whether this pandemic was going to happen or not, there was going to be a major earthquake in Southern California at some point, and if those ports get knocked offline, what is the entire nation supposed to do? Just be crippled for months? Left is best. Very well said. Ad hominem. The other problem with media literacy is the paywalls. I could grab a newspaper once in a while, but now I have to subscribe for months at a time if I want to read one article. I understand that. GF9
if you
Sam.
really need to, you should use a Internet archive to access journalism that is, like, you know, necessary for you to move through your life. I mean, if it's like an actual important story, just like you web archive.
Yeah, I didn't want to promote it, but that's sometimes I'll do. Just sometimes for the show.
However, though, usually I find that the paywall is to keep me from things I don't really need to see, like an op-ed that's just terrible and probably poorly written. And I just like, ooh, okay, I almost fell for the trap there.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal is kind of the number one example of that, to be honest with you. Come shower with Crowder. Nope, I already read that. Tim,
You just wanted to say that username again.
Exactly. Emma Van Dyke says, haircut, Brandon rocking the Clippers? Guess so.
I don't like having long hair, actually. I just got really lazy for a few months because of the heat of the summer. But this is my preferred length. I think it looks nice. Makes me look more jacked. Like, my muscles look huge when my hair is short.
Yeah. Accentuate your musculature. That's why I have really long hair, because I lack the musculature.
And the final I am of the day. My spouse and I recently celebrated our first anniversary of our COVID Zoom wedding. I forgot to ask for a shofar when that came up, but my spouse is out of commission with a rough sinus infection. To cheer them up, can I get a Matt Leck fofar?
That's pretty good.
I know, right? All right, guys. Awesome show today. Thanks so much. We will see you all tomorrow.
Bye.
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 To get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie.